The year 2011 was the last year of prosperity in Libya, in which a few rebels brutally killed a good ruler in a conspiracy. And he kept saying this until the last time: "You people don't know what you people are doing, what will happen to you after that." But those rebels who were brainwashed through the media and through the conspiracy of the United States, the mouths of huge dollar sacks were opened on them to blind them inside the money. The life of a good ruler should be destroyed. I am talking about Muammar Gaddafi. In today's video we will know who Muammar Gaddafi was, who showed America the stars during the day, who wanted Muslims to come together as a bloc and talk to non-Muslim countries eye to eye, but few were against themselves. Due to which Muammar Gaddafi left the world. And what is the condition of Libya, and why do Libyans cry remembering Muammar Gaddafi? In today's video, we will know why Muammar Gaddafi became the president of Libya in the form of a dictator from childhood. How did the circumstances arise due to which Muammar Gaddafi had to become the ruler of Libya, and what facilities did he create for the people of Libya, and how many dollars did he pay the people of Libya? What kind of facilities was he providing for the married people? So Bonatime West Key High, let's start your video on a great hero. Early life and early career. Childhood, 1940s to 1950. Muammar Muhammad Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi came into the world close to Qasr Abu Hadi, a secluded countryside spot outside the city of Sirte, located in the Sahara Desert, at the time under the control of Italy in the western part of Libya. Gaddafi was the sole child in a family of 4 siblings. His lineage traced back to the Gadhafi tribe, a tribe of lesser prominence among the Arab tribes. His mother, Aisha bin Niran, died in 1978, and his father, Muhammad Abdul Salam bin Hamd bin Muhammad, also known as Abu Minyar, passed away in 1985. Abu Minyar earned a living by herding goats and camels. The family, similar to other wandering Bedouin tribes of the era, lacked the ability to read or write and did not keep records of births. The exact year of Gaddafi's birth is not known, with estimates ranging from 1942 to the early spring of 1943. However, according to biographers David Blundy and Andrew Lycett, it could have been before 1940. Gaddafi, the only one to survive, had 3 elder sisters. His upbringing in the desert played a significant role in his lifelong affinity for the desert life, often seeking solitude there for meditation. From a young age, Gaddafi recognized the presence of European powers in Libya. The nation was under Italian rule, and it served as a front in World War II, with battles fought between Italian and British troops. Gaddafi himself stated that his grandfather, Abdeslam bin Minyar, was murdered by the Italian army during their 1911 takeover. Following the war, in 1945, Libya came under the control of British and French troops. Despite Britain and France contemplating dividing Libya among their territories, the United Nations General Assembly opted to grant Libya its independence politically. In 1951, the Kingdom of Libya was formed as a federal state, with King Idris at the helm, who was supportive of Western interests and prohibited political parties, consolidating power. Education and political activism, 1950 to 1963. Gaddafi's journey into learning started with religious lessons from a nearby Muslim instructor. He then relocated to Sirte for his primary education, finishing 6 grades in just 4 years. Although schooling in Libya came at a cost, Gaddafi's father saw the value in it and was willing to make considerable financial investments. During the week, Gaddafi would sleep in a mosque, journeying 20 miles, 32 kilometers, to see his parents on weekends and during holidays. Despite his father's own limited education, he was committed to ensuring his son received an education. As a member of the Bedouin tribe, Gaddafi experienced bullying and prejudice from his peers in the city, yet he also had the opportunity to learn from many Egyptian educators who kept him updated on major events in Egypt. The family then settled in the market town of Sava in Fezzan, south-central Libya, where Gaddafi continued his education at the secondary level while his father took on the role of a caretaker for a tribal leader. At school, Gaddafi was well liked, and among his friends was his closest companion, Abdul Salam Jalaud, who would later serve in significant roles within Gaddafi's government. Nasser, the president of Egypt, was a revered figure in the political circles of Libya, serving as a mentor to Gaddafi. His educational background in Sava, with a significant number of Egyptian instructors, provided him with access to Arabic newspapers and radio programs such as Cairo's Voice of the Arabs. Gaddafi was exposed to pivotal moments in the Arab region, including the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the Egyptian Revolution of 1952, the Suez Crisis of 1956, and the brief United Arab Republic (UAR) period from 1958 to 1961. He held Nasser in high regard for his political reforms in Egypt, which emphasized Arab nationalism, opposition to colonial rule, anti-Zionism, and a transition from a capitalist to a socialist economy. Gaddafi found inspiration in Nasser's Philosophy of the Revolution, a book that detailed plans for overthrowing the government. An Egyptian educator, Mahmoud Afay, who was known to support Gaddafi's political views, suggested that a revolution would require military support. Gaddafi orchestrated protests and circulated pamphlets criticizing the monarchy. In October 1961, he spearheaded a demonstration against Syria's withdrawal from the UAR and collected funds to send messages of solidarity to Nasser. This movement led to the detainment of 20 students. Additionally, Gaddafi and his group vandalized a local hotel that was accused of selling alcohol, which led to their expulsion from Sava. Afterward, Gaddafi relocated to Misrata and enrolled in Misrata Secondary School. He continued to be deeply involved in the cause of Arab nationalism but chose not to become a member of any of the outlawed political groups in the area, including the Arab Nationalist Movement, the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party, and the Muslim Brotherhood, opting instead to avoid getting caught up in divisions within these factions. He enthusiastically studied the life of Nasser, the French Revolution of 1789, the political theories of Syrian scholar Michel Aflaq, and the life stories of Abraham Lincoln, Sun Yat-sen, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Military training, 1963 to 1966. Before pursuing a career in the military, Gaddafi briefly attended the University of Libya in Benghazi to study history, but he left before completing his degree to enlist. Despite having a criminal record, he started his military training at the Royal Military Academy in Benghazi in 1963, alongside a group of friends from Misrata who shared his political views. For those from less privileged backgrounds in Libya, the military provided an uncommon opportunity for social advancement, and Gaddafi saw it as a way to bring about political reform. Under the tutelage of the British military, which was under King Idris, Gaddafi grew increasingly frustrated with the British, whom he saw as colonialists. He was unwilling to learn English, was disrespectful to British officers, and ultimately did not pass his exams. British instructors reported him for not following orders and for being abusive, possibly due to his role in the 1963 assassination of the military academy's commander. Despite these allegations, they were overlooked, and Gaddafi quickly rose through the ranks. In 1964, Gaddafi and a group of devoted followers established the Central Committee of the Free Officers Movement, taking inspiration from Nasser's predecessor in Egypt. They convened in secret, formed a covert network, and combined their earnings into a unified account. Gaddafi roamed across Libya, collecting information and forging alliances with supporters, yet the government's intelligence agencies overlooked him, viewing him as a negligible danger. Upon completing his studies in August 1965, Gaddafi took up a position as a communications officer in the Army Signal Corps. In April 1966, he was dispatched to the United Kingdom for additional training. During a span of 9 months, he finished courses in English at Beaconsfield, Buckinghamshire, signal instruction at Bovington Camp, Dorset, and signal instruction for infantry at Hythe, Kent. Contrary to later tales, he did not study at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. The head of the Bovington Signal course noted that Gaddafi adeptly mastered English, showing a strong grasp of voice techniques. Observing his interests in literature and football, he characterized Gaddafi as a funny and optimistic officer, diligent and thorough. Despite these favorable evaluations, Gaddafi harbored negative feelings towards England. He alleged that British Army officers racially mocked him and struggled to adapt to the culture. Stating his Arab identity, he donned traditional Libyan attire while strolling through Piccadilly in London. Reflecting on his time in England, Gaddafi acknowledged that while he initially believed it to be more progressive than Libya, he returned with a heightened sense of pride in our values, ideals, and social character. Libyan Arab Republic. Coup d'etat, 1969. By the late 1960s, the government of King Idris was increasingly disliked. It had worsened Libya's age-old regional and tribal splits by centralizing the federal system to take advantage of the nation's oil riches. The oil sector was rife with corruption and deep-rooted favoritism. Arab nationalism was on the rise, and after Egypt lost the Six-Day War to Israel in 1967, there were widespread protests. Idris' government was seen as supportive of Israel because of its ties with Western countries, leading to protests against Western influence in Tripoli and Benghazi. Libyan workers also boycotted oil facilities in support of Egypt. By 1969, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, believed that parts of Libya's military were plotting a coup. Although it was rumored that they knew about Gaddafi's Free Officers movement, the CIA claimed they were actually monitoring Abdul Aziz Shalhai's Black Boots Revolutionary Group. Abdul Aziz Shalhai, who was essentially Idris' right-hand man, and his brother Omar were the offspring of Idris' former advisor, Ibrahim Shalhai, who was killed by Queen Fatima's nephew in 1954. After their father's death, they became Idris' favorites. In mid-1969, Idris went on a trip abroad to spend the summer in Turkey and Greece, amidst widespread speculation about his abdication or a British-backed coup by the Shalhai brothers planned for September 5. Seeing this as their final opportunity to stop the Shalhis from taking over the monarchy, Gaddafi's Free Officers launched Operation Jerusalem. Without taking this action, Gaddafi's forces would have likely been defeated by Abdul Aziz Shalhai and the influential families in Cyrenaica who backed the Shalhi clan. On September 1, Gaddafi's Free Officers took over airports, police stations, radio stations, and government buildings in Tripoli and Benghazi. Gaddafi seized control of the Burqa barracks in Benghazi, while Umar Maheshi took over the Tripoli barracks, and Jalaud captured the city's anti-aircraft batteries. Queldi Hamidi took over the Tripoli radio station and was tasked with arresting Crown Prince Sayed Hassan Arida al-Mahdi al-Sanusi, forcing him to give up his claim to the throne. They encountered little resistance and used minimal force against the monarchists. Following the overthrow of the monarchy, Gaddafi declared the establishment of the Libyan Arab Republic. Through a radio broadcast to the people, he declared the dissolution of the reactionary and corrupt government, describing its presence as the stench of which has sickened and horrified us all. The coup, which was bloodless, was initially referred to as the White Revolution, and later renamed the 1 September Revolution in honor of the date it took place. Gaddafi emphasized that the coup led by the Free Officers was a revolution, signaling the start of extensive social, economic, and political transformation in Libya. He declared that the revolution was about freedom, socialism, and unity, and in the years that followed, he took steps to realize these objectives. Consolidating leadership, 1969 to 1973. The Central Committee of the Free Officers, comprising 12 individuals, declared themselves the Revolutionary Command Council, RCC, establishing themselves as the ruling authority of the newly formed republic. Lieutenant Gaddafi was elected as the RCC chairman, effectively making him the unofficial leader of the state. He advanced to the rank of colonel and took on the role of the military's commander-in-chief. Jalaud was named prime minister, while a civilian council of ministers, led by Suleiman Maghribi, was created to carry out the policies of the RCC. The capital of Libya was relocated from Al-Bayda to Tripoli. Despite the RCC being intended to function as a collective body making decisions through agreement, Gaddafi often took control of its operations. Some members attempted to limit what they saw as his overreach. Gaddafi was the public representative of the government, with the identities of the other RCC members only revealed to the public on January 10, 1970. All members were young individuals from rural, working class, and middle class backgrounds, lacking higher education, setting them apart from the conservative, wealthy, and highly educated officials who had previously governed. Following the coup, the RCC focused on establishing and strengthening the revolutionary government and modernizing the nation. They removed monarchists and members of Idris Senussi clan from positions in the political and military sectors, believing these individuals were against the desires of the Libyan populace. Courts known as People's Courts were set up to try and imprison many monarchist politicians and journalists, though no executions took place. Idris was sentenced to death but was later acquitted. 3 months after taking power, the military and interior ministers from the eastern Barca area failed in an attempt to overthrow him. In 1970, Idris' great-nephew Ahmed al-Senussi tried another coup, which was stopped in August. Ahmed was sentenced to death, but this sentence was later commuted, and he was pardoned by Gaddafi in 2001. In May 1970, the Revolutionary Intellectuals Seminar was organized to align intellectuals with the revolution, and that year, the legislative review and amendment process integrated secular and religious legal codes, introducing Sharia into the legal framework. The RCC continued to rule by decree, banning political parties in May 1970, prohibiting trade unions in May 1970, and outlawing workers' strikes and suspending newspapers in 1972. In September 1971, Gaddafi stepped down from his position, expressing dissatisfaction with the reform progress, but he returned to his role within a month. In July 1972, amid widespread rumors that Gaddafi had been removed or imprisoned by political adversaries, a new 18-member cabinet was established, with a majority of civilian technocrats as chosen by Gaddafi, with only Jalloud and Abdul Munaim al-Hawni being military figures. In February 1973, Gaddafi once more resigned, only to return to his position the following month. Economic and social reform. The RCC's initial economic strategy was deeply shaped by principles of state capitalism. This strategy encompassed a variety of efforts aimed at supporting business owners and nurturing the development of a Libyan middle class. A key effort was the Green Revolution, initiated in September 1969. This initiative sought to expand Libya's agricultural territory to enhance productivity and lessen the nation's reliance on imported food, aiming for complete self-sufficiency in food production. The government reclaimed and redistributed all land taken from Italian settlers or left unused. They also set up irrigation systems along the northern coast and around various inland oases to bolster farming. However, the cost of production often exceeded the value of the crops, and Libyan farming continued to face a deficit, depending heavily on government subsidies. Libya's main export was crude oil, and Gaddafi was committed to improving the country's oil industry. In October 1969, he declared that the existing trade agreements were unjust and heavily favored foreign companies. He threatened to reduce oil production unless better terms were reached. By December, the Prime Minister Jalloud had managed to secure an increase in the price of Libyan oil. This action was quickly followed by other OPEC countries, leading to a rise in global crude oil prices. On March 20, 1971, the RCC finalized the Tripoli Agreement, which included better tax terms, compensation for past services, and fairer pricing from oil companies. These measures brought Libya an additional $1 billion in revenue in the first year alone. To further solidify its grip on the oil industry, the RCC initiated a program of nationalization. This began in December 1971 with the expropriation of British Petroleum's stake in the British Petroleum NB Hunt Sahir field. In September 1973, the RCC announced that it would nationalize 51% of all foreign oil companies' operations in Libya. This included the stake of Nelson Bunker Hunt, son of H.L. Hunt, who had been instrumental in the discovery of oil in Libya. Among the companies affected by this nationalization was Occidental Petroleum, owned by Armand Hammer. For Gaddafi, this move was crucial for achieving socialism and proved to be economically beneficial. Libya's gross domestic product grew from $3.8 billion in 1969 to $13.7 billion in 1974, and further to $24.5 billion in 1979. As a result, the standard of living for Libyans saw a significant improvement. By 1979, the average per capita income had risen to $8,170, up from $40 in 1951, surpassing that of many industrialized nations like Italy and the UK. In May 1970, the Revolutionary Intellectuals Seminar took place to bring together thinkers with the objectives of the revolution. That same year, the Legislative Review and Amendment merged both secular and religious legal codes, incorporating Sharia into the judicial framework. The Revolutionary Command Council, exercising its authority through decrees, upheld the prohibition on political parties, prohibited trade unions in May 1970, and banned workers' strikes and suspended newspapers in 1972. The leadership of Gaddafi experienced moments of withdrawal and reinstatement. In September 1971, he stepped down, voicing his discontent with the reform progress but rejoined his role within a month. In July 1972, amidst speculations about his removal or detention, a new cabinet of 18 members was established, with a majority of civilian experts, in accordance with Gaddafi's preference, with only two military figures, Jalloud and Abdul Muammar al-Hawni. Gaddafi once more resigned in February 1973 but resumed his duties the subsequent month. The Revolutionary Command Council, RCC, embarked on a bold plan to transform society by adopting Sharia as a key foundation for change. This all-encompassing strategy included various actions aimed at changing the fabric of Libyan society. Alcohol was quickly banned, and places like nightclubs and Christian churches were closed down to follow Islamic values. Traditional Libyan attire was encouraged as a sign of cultural pride, and Arabic was made the sole language for official documents and road signs, promoting linguistic unity. The RCC also focused on economic changes. They increased the lowest wage by twofold and set price limits to ease the financial burden on the people. Furthermore, they required landlords to reduce rent by 30 to 40% to make housing more affordable for the average citizen. These steps were taken to address social and economic disparities and improve the quality of life for everyone in Libya. A key area of the RCC's reforms was the advancement of women's rights. Recognizing the need to break down restrictive social norms, Gaddafi created the Revolutionary Women's Formation to advocate for gender equality. Legal reforms were made to protect women's rights, including laws ensuring equal pay and setting a minimum age for marriage to 16. With the woman's consent being a necessary condition for marriage. Additionally, Gaddafi supported the formation of the Libyan General Women's Federation to further promote women's rights and opportunities. The RCC also used Libya's oil wealth to support extensive social welfare programs from 1969 to 1973. These programs covered various areas, especially housing, healthcare, and education. Housing projects were launched to address homelessness and replace the large, informal settlements that had grown due to fast urbanization. Meanwhile, investments in healthcare led to significant improvements, with diseases like malaria being eliminated and others, such as trachoma and tuberculosis, being greatly reduced. Education saw major changes as well, with the mandatory school age being extended from 6 to 9 years. Adult literacy programs were introduced to ensure more people could access education, and the creation and expansion of universities, including Beta University, Tripoli University, and Benghazi University, aimed to make higher education more accessible and promote social mobility. In addition to these tangible changes, the RCC aimed to build a sense of national unity among Libya's varied population. Efforts to overcome regional and tribal differences included redrawing administrative lines and sidelining traditional tribal leaders seen as remnants of the old regime. However, these actions faced opposition in some areas, leading Gaddafi to form the Arab Socialist Union (ASU) in June 1971. The ASU was meant to rally public support for the revolution, but it struggled to achieve the widespread support and mobilization Gaddafi had hoped for. Foreign relations. The Revolutionary Command Council, RCC, set out on a bold campaign for social change, deeply rooted in Sharia law, with the goal of completely transforming the fabric of Libyan society. This wide-ranging plan included a variety of projects designed to change different aspects of daily life in the country. Alcohol was quickly banned, and places like nightclubs and Christian churches were shut down to match Islamic values. At the same time, there was a strong push to promote traditional Libyan clothing as a way to keep cultural identity alive. Additionally, Arabic was made the only language used for official purposes and road signs, aiming to promote unity and a sense of belonging among the people. The focus on economic change was central to the RCC's plan. Along with doubling the lowest wage, the council put in place strict price controls and reduced rental prices by 30 to 40%. These steps were carefully planned to ease the financial strain on the people and to tackle the existing social and economic gaps, all with the goal of improving the quality of life for everyone in Libya. The RCC also made significant strides in improving the status of women and breaking down deep-seated gender inequalities. Understanding the importance of changing traditional social norms, Colonel Gaddafi led the creation of the Revolutionary Women's Formation, a group dedicated to fighting for gender equality and women's rights. Subsequently, major legal changes were made to ensure equality and protection for women, including laws that guaranteed equal pay and set a minimum age for marriage to 16, with the need for consent being a requirement. Furthermore, Gaddafi supported the formation of the Libyan General Women's Federation, which further advanced the rights and opportunities for women throughout the country. Utilizing Libya's growing oil wealth, the RCC launched extensive social welfare programs from 1969 to 1973. These programs covered essential areas like housing, healthcare, and education. Major housing projects were started to eliminate homelessness and replace the growing slums that had appeared due to fast urban growth. At the same time, significant investments were made in healthcare, leading to major achievements such as the elimination of malaria and significant drops in diseases like trachoma and tuberculosis. Educational reform was another key part of the RCC's strategy, aimed at making education more accessible and empowering people intellectually. Mandatory schooling was increased from 6 to 9 years, and adult literacy programs were introduced to make education more widely available. Moreover, the creation and expansion of universities, including Beta University, Tripoli University, and Benghazi University, played a crucial role in increasing educational opportunities and social mobility throughout the country. Beyond these concrete changes, the RCC also worked on creating a unified national identity among Libya's diverse population. Administrative borders were redrawn, and leaders from the old regime who were associated with it were pushed aside in favor of those who supported the revolution. However, these efforts faced opposition in some areas, leading to the creation of the Arab Socialist Union (ASU) in June 1971. Despite its intended role as a vanguard party to mobilize revolutionary fervor, the ASU struggled to garner widespread support as envisaged by Gaddafi. Gaddafi was particularly critical of the US for its backing of Israel and aligned with the Palestinians in the conflict over Israel, seeing the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 as a Western-imposed colonial rule on the Arab nations. He believed that the Palestinian resistance against Israeli and Western forces was a justified fight against the occupation of their land. He urged Arab nations to engage in a continuous war against Israel, and in 1970, he launched a jihad fund to support Palestinian fighters. In 1972, he established the first Nasserite Volunteers Center to train fighters against Israel. Similar to Nasser, Gaddafi supported Yasser Arafat and his Fatah faction over more radical and Marxist Palestinian factions. However, over time, Gaddafi's relationship with Arafat deteriorated, with Gaddafi finding him too moderate and advocating for more aggressive tactics. Instead, he backed various militias such as the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, General Command, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, as-Saika, the Palestinian Popular Struggle Front, and the Abu Nidal Organization. He also funded the Black September Organization, which was responsible for the 1972 Munich massacre of Israeli athletes in West Germany and which had the bodies of the killed militants flown to Libya for a hero's funeral. Gaddafi provided financial backing to numerous militant groups around the world, including the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, the Almighty Black P. Stone Nation, the Tupamaros, the 19th of April Movement, the Sandinista National Liberation Front in Nicaragua, the ANC, among others in the fight against apartheid in South Africa, the Provisional Irish Republican Army, ETA, Action Direct, the Red Brigades, and the Red Army faction in Europe, and the Armenian Secret Army, the Japanese Red Army, the Free Aceh Movement, and the Moro National Liberation Front in the Philippines. His support for these groups was varied, often changing allegiances as seen in the Eritrean War of Independence. Throughout the 1970s, Libya's financial backing of these groups established it as a key player in the Third World's battle against colonialism and neocolonialism. Despite being labeled as terrorists by critics, Gaddafi rejected this label, seeing these groups as revolutionaries in the struggle for liberation. The Popular Revolution, 1973 to 1977. On April 16, 1973, Gaddafi announced the start of a people's revolution during a speech in Zawara. This signaled the beginning of a transformative journey, encapsulated in a 5-point strategy. The initial step involved scrapping current laws to make space for revolutionary actions. The second step required eliminating all those against the revolution, while the third aimed at a complete overhaul of the administration to get rid of bureaucracy and upper-class influences. The fourth step focused on the people forming people's committees and arming themselves to protect the revolution. The final step kicked off a cultural revolution aimed at removing what Gaddafi saw as harmful foreign influences from Libya. Gaddafi thoroughly discussed this new phase of revolution through lectures in Libya, Egypt, and France, drawing comparisons with the Cultural Revolution in China. The People's Revolution led to the establishment of General People's Committees, designed to boost political consciousness among the Libyan people. Although there were no specific guidelines on how to form them, Gaddafi saw these committees as a democratic alternative to the traditional party-based systems, envisioning them as tools for rallying support for the Revolutionary Command Council. They were charged with reducing the power of traditional leaders and bureaucracy and implementing a new legal framework chosen by the people. These committees expanded in schools and colleges, playing roles like screening staff, courses, and textbooks to ensure they were in line with revolutionary principles. While encouraging a high degree of public participation in decision-making within the limits set by the Revolutionary Command Council, the People's Committees also deepened tribal divisions and tensions. Moreover, they acted as watchdogs, helping the security forces spot dissenters critical of the Revolutionary Command Council, leading to the arrest of those with various ideologies. Organized in a pyramid structure, the committees included local working groups, with their elected members moving up to district and national levels, divided between the General People's Congress and the General People's Committee. Gaddafi and the Revolutionary Command Council maintained control over major decisions. By overcoming regional and tribal loyalties, the committee system promoted national unity and centralized power, reinforcing Gaddafi's grip on the government machinery. Third International Theory and the Green Book. In June 1973, Gaddafi introduced the Third International Theory, a set of beliefs that supported the popular revolution. This theory rejected both Western capitalism and Marxist-Leninist atheism, considering the US and the Soviet Union as imperial powers. Similar to Mao Zedong's Three Worlds theory, Gaddafi's beliefs aimed to unite Arab and Islamic forces against imperialism, praising nationalism as a forward-moving force. He imagined a united Arab state leading the Islamic and Third Worlds in this fight. Religion was central to this ideology, with Gaddafi pushing for a return to the basics of the Quran, avoiding academic interpretations and the Hadith, which received backlash from Libyan religious leaders. The adoption of the Third International Theory happened at the same time as the strengthening of Sharia law in Libya. Actions like flogging for adultery or homosexuality were taken, showing Gaddafi's dedication to Islamic values. This ideological change led to the creation of the Green Book, a 3-volume guide written between 1975 and 1979. The first volume criticized representative democracy for the sake of direct involvement through General People's Congresses, GPCs. The second volume discussed Gaddafi's socialist views, and the third focused on social issues, advocating for traditional family and tribal structures. Despite pushing for direct involvement, Gaddafi's government gradually centralized authority. In 1975, a plot by a RCC member, Umar Maheshi, to overthrow him was stopped, resulting in the removal of dissidents from the military and the creation of the Office for the Security of the Revolution. Gaddafi tried to gain support through mass mobilization, establishing revolutionary student councils to fight against opposition in universities. However, student protests broke out in Tripoli and Benghazi, facing severe responses and mandatory national service. The crackdown on opposition didn't stop at students. It also included conservative religious leaders and the Muslim Brotherhood, seen as barriers to Gaddafi's revolutionary goals. Their resistance led to their persecution and the shutdown of privately owned Islamic organizations. Moreover, Gaddafi's policies, such as the government's monopoly on foreign trade and the distribution of oil revenues to foreign causes, pushed away parts of Libyan society, especially the merchant class. This dissatisfaction led to the 1974 bombing of a military building in Benghazi, marking the first attack on civilians by Gaddafi's government. By 1977, Gaddafi had fully consolidated his power, dissolving the RCC and concentrating power in his own hands. Dissenters faced harsh punishments, including public executions. Despite international criticism, Gaddafi's government remained determined in its quest for revolutionary change, at the expense of dissenting voices and opposition from within Libyan society. Foreign relations. After Anwar Sadat came to power in Egypt, the relationship between Libya and Egypt quickly deteriorated, turning into a long-standing conflict often likened to a Cold War. Sadat grew increasingly frustrated with Gaddafi's erratic behavior and his continuous calls for Egypt to undergo a cultural revolution similar to what was happening in Libya. This discomfort was made worse by Gaddafi's ambitious plans for regional dominance, which clashed with Sadat's vision for Egypt's role in the Arab world. The tension between the two countries reached a peak in February 1973 when Israeli forces shot down Libyan Arab Airlines Flight 114, resulting in the death of Salah Bazir, Libya's foreign minister, who was believed to have been targeted by Israel as a form of retaliation for the Munich massacre. Gaddafi was furious at what he saw as Egypt's failure to stop the attack and planned his own form of revenge. One of his plans involved attacking the Queen Elizabeth II, a British ship carrying American Jews to Israel's 25th anniversary celebrations. Gaddafi ordered an Egyptian submarine to carry out the attack, but Sadat stepped in to prevent a military confrontation. Gaddafi's bitterness towards Egypt deepened when he felt sidelined during the planning of the Yom Kippur War against Israel, which began in 1973 with Egypt and Syria. Gaddafi believed that Egypt's choice to pursue peace talks instead of continuing the war was a betrayal of the Arab cause. He openly criticized Sadat and called for his removal, further escalating tensions between the two leaders. The divide between Libya and Egypt also showed in Gaddafi's aggressive stance against Sudanese President Ghaffar Naimiri, who was allied with Sadat. Gaddafi backed opposition groups, including the Sudan People's Liberation Army, with the aim of destabilizing Naimiri's government. In a shocking development, Gaddafi freed Abdulaziz Shinib, a former commander under King Idris, from prison and tasked him with killing King Hussein of Jordan. However, Shinib defected to Jordan, revealing the assassination plot and damaging relations between Libya and Jordan. Moreover, Gaddafi's harsh criticism of Syria's role in the Lebanese civil war, especially its attack on the Lebanese national movement, further damaged relations with Syria. Gaddafi accused Syrian President Hafez al-Assad of national treason, becoming the sole Arab leader to openly denounce Syria's actions. Amidst these regional conflicts, Libya launched a campaign to spread Islam across Africa. Gaddafi established the Islamic Call Society in 1973, setting up numerous centers across the continent to promote Islamic teachings and culture. Additionally, Libya provided substantial financial support to African nations, often using financial incentives to encourage them to cut diplomatic ties with Israel. Gaddafi also developed close ties with Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's government in Pakistan, exchanging nuclear research and military aid. However, the relationship deteriorated after Bhutto was overthrown by Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq, who rejected further Libyan funding for Pakistan's nuclear program. In the Maghreb area, Gaddafi made an effort to create a political alliance with Tunisia in 1974, named the Arab Islamic Republic, but this plan was unsuccessful because of resistance in Tunisia. Following this, Gaddafi focused on Algeria, entering into a defensive pact supposedly designed to oppose Moroccan territorial ambitions and back the Polisario Front in its fight for sovereignty in Western Sahara against Morocco. Additionally, Libya aimed to expand its economic portfolio by investing in major European companies and purchasing property in nations such as Italy and Malta, which turned out to be profitable investments during the oil crisis of the 1980s. These actions highlighted Gaddafi's goal to position Libya as a major international force while reinforcing his control over the country. Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya. Foundation, 1977. On March 2, 1977, a critical turning point in the history of Libya took place with the enactment of the Declaration on the Establishment of the Authority of the People by the General People's Congress. This declaration signified the formal shift from the Libyan Arab Republic to the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, a name that Muammar Gaddafi himself coined. This change was a key element of Gaddafi's vision for a society driven by the people. The introduction of the new political system was accompanied by a symbolic alteration in the national flag, which was redesigned to feature a solid green color, reflecting Gaddafi's focus on Arab nationalism and his dream of a united Libya under his leadership. In theory, the Jamahiriya was designed as a direct democracy, with the power to make decisions held by the citizens through the Basic People's Congresses, BPCs. These congresses, made up of all adult Libyan citizens, were responsible for discussing and voting on matters of national importance. The representatives chosen from these congresses formed the General People's Congress, which met annually and was televised live. However, the power structure within the Jamahiriya was intricate. Although Gaddafi initially held the role of General Secretary of the General People's Congress, he later assumed the title of Leader of the Revolution, consolidating his power. In reality, the General People's Congress often acted as a platform to support Gaddafi's policies, while dissenting opinions were often sidelined or suppressed. The Jamahiriya aimed to address all political needs within Libya, yet other political groups were prohibited, including political parties, trade unions, and women's organizations. This centralized authority was strengthened by Gaddafi's claim of legal authority from the Quran, initially to uphold Sharia law. However, Gaddafi's changing views on Islamic law, influenced by socialist ideas in the Green Book, led to inconsistencies and drew criticism from conservative religious leaders. Internationally, the Jamahiriya encountered obstacles, notably a short-lived border dispute with Egypt in July 1977. Despite Egypt's military victory, both countries chose to pursue peace through mediation by other Arab nations. This conflict, along with Egypt and Sudan's alliance with the United States, led Libya to seek strategic partnerships, particularly with the Soviet Union, though these were not necessarily political in nature. Furthermore, Gaddafi built relationships with leaders outside the Arab world, including visits to Moscow to meet with Soviet leaders and to Yugoslavia to see Josip Broz Tito. His close relationship with Romanian leader Nicolae Ceausescu was demonstrated by their mutual support following the defection of Romanian spy chief Ion Mihai Pisipa. The establishment of the Jamahiriya marked a significant moment in the history of Libya, symbolizing Gaddafi's vision to create a distinct political system driven by his revolutionary ideology. However, the actual implementation of this system often fell short of its democratic aspirations, leading to centralized control and restricted political freedoms. Revolutionary Committees and Furthering Socialism, 1978 to 1980. In 1978, Gaddafi's decision to step down as the head of the General People's Congress signaled a major change in the political scene of Libya. This action was a key part of his strategy to set apart the revolutionary goals from the official government structures. Even after giving up his official role, Gaddafi still held a lot of power as the self-proclaimed leader of the revolution and continued to lead the military. However, the true nature of Libya's political system didn't match its claims of being a direct democracy. Historian Dirk van de Waal highlighted that the decision-making was closely controlled by a small circle of advisors and allies around Gaddafi, raising questions about the country's democratic claims. During this time, Libya moved significantly towards socialist ideals. In March 1978, the government introduced plans for redistributing housing, aiming for widespread ownership. These plans included limits on property rights and the expropriation of rental properties, which were then sold to tenants at lower prices to ensure more people could afford housing. Moreover, in September 1978, Gaddafi encouraged the People's Committees to take over many businesses, turning them into worker-owned cooperatives led by elected members. This move was intended to reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies and lessen the private sector's influence on the economy. The official declaration in March 1979 of the division between the government and the revolution was a critical point in Libya's political development. This led to the creation of revolutionary committees, mainly made up of young, passionate members. These committees worked closely with the People's Committees in various areas like education, labor unions, law enforcement, and the military, playing a key role in spreading revolutionary ideas. Yet, the enthusiasm of the revolutionary committees sometimes resulted in random actions and the suppression of opposition, leading to the Green Terror. Despite hopes for a more open and participatory political system, Libya under Gaddafi's leadership saw power concentrated in a few hands, with opposition and dissent severely limited. In 1979, the revolutionary committees began a wide-ranging program to redistribute land across the Jeffra Plain, a project that lasted until 1981. This effort was designed to tackle issues related to land ownership and agricultural inequalities by redistributing land among the people. Moreover, in May 1980, the government took steps to redistribute wealth, focusing on individuals with bank accounts over 1,000 dinars to seize excess funds. This action aimed to address economic disparities and promote a more equal distribution of wealth among the population. Subsequently, the next year, the General People's Congress, GPC, declared a significant increase in state control over economic activities. The government took charge of all import, export, and distribution functions, effectively replacing private businesses with state-owned entities, including supermarkets. This move was intended to centralize economic governance and ensure fair access to goods, but it inadvertently led to a decrease in the availability of consumer products and the growth of a black market economy. Amid these economic reforms, Gaddafi was dedicated to improving women's status in Libyan society. In 1979, he initiated the Revolutionary Women's Formation, highlighting a renewed focus on gender equality and empowerment. This project aimed to replace the existing Libyan General Women's Federation with a more assertive and revolutionary platform for advocating women's rights. Additionally, Gaddafi's creation of a women's military academy in Tripoli in 1978 demonstrated his commitment to integrating women into the military, despite facing significant controversy and opposition. However, the radical policies and authoritarian rule of the Jamahiriya provoked widespread opposition, both at home and abroad. Internally, Islamic fundamentalists became a major source of opposition, inspired by the success of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. At the same time, economic grievances fueled discontent among those impacted by wealth confiscation and state-controlled economic policies. Externally, opposition groups, such as the National Front for the Salvation of Libya, NFSL, carried out attacks on the government, while others turned against Libyan diplomats overseas. In response to growing dissent, Gaddafi gave the revolutionary committees the power to intensify their crackdown on perceived threats to the regime. Overseas branches of the committees were set up to quell counter-revolutionary activities, leading to the killing of dissidents across Europe and elsewhere. Gaddafi's bold support of such measures, including threats against dissidents, highlighted the regime's unyielding stance on suppressing dissent. Moreover, Gaddafi's foreign policy choices further isolated Libya on the global stage. Despite efforts to improve relations with Western countries, such as the United States, through diplomatic efforts and engagement, Libya found itself increasingly cut off from the international community due to its backing of militant groups and state-sponsored terrorism. Additionally, tensions with neighboring countries, such as Egypt and Sudan, escalated, further isolating Libya diplomatically and contributing to regional instability. During President Jimmy Carter's term, Libya took several steps to improve its relationship with the United States. These actions included building connections with key figures like Billy Carter, the brother of the president, and hiring former CIA agents to help deal with complicated political situations. However, despite these efforts, Libya suffered a major diplomatic blow in 1979 when the United States labeled it as a state sponsor of terrorism. This decision severely damaged the relationship between the two countries, paving the way for increased tension. The already tense relationship between Libya and the United States worsened due to various incidents. For example, a protest in support of those involved in the Iran hostage crisis led to the destruction of the U.S. embassy. Additionally, Libyan fighter jets shot down U.S. planes over the Mediterranean, indicating a significant rise in conflict and contributing to the worsening of diplomatic relations. Furthermore, the relationship between Libya and Lebanon, particularly with its Shiite communities, deteriorated following the unexplained disappearance of Imam Musa al-Sadr during his visit to Libya in 1978. The Lebanese government accused Libya, especially Muammar Gaddafi, of being involved in Sadr's disappearance, which led to increased tension and a breakdown in their relationship. In the Middle East, Libya's relationship with Pakistan became strained after the execution of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1979. Despite Gaddafi's attempts to convince the Pakistani government to spare Bhutto's life, the execution went ahead, causing a further decline in their relationship. In response, Gaddafi supported al-Zulfikar, an anti-Zia insurgency led by Bhutto's sons, and expelled all Pakistani citizens from Libya, further damaging their relations. On the other hand, Libya's relationship with Syria improved due to their shared hostility towards Israel and Egypt's Sirte. In 1980, Gaddafi and Syrian President Hafez al-Assad discussed forming a political union, with Libya offering to pay off Syria's large debt to the Soviet Union as part of the deal. Although Assad eventually backed out of the agreement due to outside pressures, the alliance between Libya and Syria remained strong. Additionally, Uganda became an important ally for Libya, leading to Gaddafi sending troops to support President Idi Amin during the Uganda-Tanzania War in 1979. However, the mission ended in failure, resulting in heavy losses for Libya and a retreat. As a result, Gaddafi publicly criticized Amin, expressing regret for his previous support and condemning him as a fascist and a show-off. Conflict with the U.S. and its allies, 1981 to 1986. In the early 1980s, Libya was grappling with severe economic difficulties, as shown by a dramatic drop in its yearly oil earnings from an astonishing $21 billion to just $5.4 billion between 1982 and 1986. This sharp decline put a lot of pressure on the country's finances, leading to a re-evaluation of its economic strategies and priorities. Trying to diversify its economy and tackle urgent infrastructure issues, Libya began major projects, notably starting work on the Great Man-Made River in 1983. This huge project aimed to collect and move water from the southern desert of Libya to northern cities, promising to solve ongoing water shortages. However, despite significant investment and effort, the project faced many obstacles and delays, remaining unfinished for many years. As economic difficulties grew, the Libyan government chose to adopt austerity measures to encourage self-reliance and reduce dependence on foreign aid. This involved strict cuts in various areas of spending, along with policies to limit imports and increase local production. Moreover, in an effort to control the economy more closely, the government took direct control over important sectors like import-export and distribution, adopting a more centralized economic management style. However, these actions had serious social impacts, including the expulsion of thousands of foreign workers, mainly from Egypt and Tunisia, in 1985. This mass removal not only strained relations with neighboring countries but also increased domestic tensions, reflecting the wider economic and social challenges facing Libyan society. At the same time, internal opposition and resistance remained a constant threat to Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's government. In May 1984, Gaddafi narrowly avoided an attack on his residence at Bab al-Azizia, which was allegedly planned by dissident militias linked to opposition groups such as the National Front for the Salvation of Libya, NFSL, or the Muslim Brotherhood. Following this, thousands of suspected dissidents were arrested, highlighting the regime's tight control over power amidst rising unrest. Additionally, there were 2 assassination attempts on Gaddafi's life in early 1985, showing the ongoing discontent and unrest within the military. The mysterious death of Colonel Hassan Ishqal, a key military figure, added to the sense of uncertainty and intrigue, sparking rumors of power struggles and potential involvement by Gaddafi or his inner circle. Externally, Libya's involvement in Chad's civil war made its situation more complicated. Initially supporting the Fralanat militia, Libya faced internal divisions within the group, leading to changing alliances and increasing conflict. Multiple interventions in Chad's internal conflicts, including a brief withdrawal due to international pressure, failed to stop the instability, leading to a humiliating defeat in the Toyota War against Chadian forces in 1987. This defeat not only damaged Libya's regional ambitions but also fueled internal discontent and weakened Gaddafi's hold on power. In the early 1980s, Libya went through a time of deep economic and political turmoil, marked by various domestic issues and tense international relations. This period was marked by a mix of economic downturns, security threats from within, and growing conflicts with nearby nations and Western countries. Economically, Libya suffered major setbacks as its main source of income, oil, saw a sharp decline from $21 billion to $5.4 billion a year between 1982 and 1986. This sudden drop in oil earnings put a strain on the government's budget and led to strict budget cuts to deal with the decrease in income. To tackle these economic problems, the government shifted funds to big projects like the Great Man-Made River, aimed at tapping into groundwater in the Sahara Desert to solve water shortages and boost farming. However, the project faced difficulties and delays, making the economic situation worse. Internally, the rule of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was challenged by growing opposition and protests. In May 1984, militant groups carried out bold attacks on Gaddafi's fortified compound at Bab al-Azizia, leading to a severe crackdown on those who opposed the government. The regime also dealt with power struggles, including reports of military officers plotting to assassinate Gaddafi, highlighting the instability of his leadership. Externally, Libya's aggressive foreign policy and backing of militant groups in neighboring countries increased regional tensions and damaged diplomatic relations. In Chad, Libya's involvement in the civil war worsened instability and led to military interventions, deepening the country's involvement in regional conflicts. Additionally, Libya's aggressive approach towards Western countries, especially the United States, during Ronald Reagan's term, led to accusations of state-sponsored terrorism, assassination attempts, and economic sanctions, as well as military confrontations. Moreover, Libya's attempts to build alliances with other countries, like Morocco through the Arab-African Union, failed due to political disagreements and rivalries. Despite early efforts to improve relations and work together on regional issues, these efforts were short-lived, leading to renewed tensions and the eventual breakdown of the proposed union and strained relations between the two countries. In conclusion, the early 1980s were a period of turmoil for Libya, marked by economic instability, internal unrest, and diplomatic isolation. These challenges would continue to influence the country's future and shape its role in the global political arena. In 1980, Muammar Gaddafi sought assistance from Edwin P. Wilson, a CIA ex-agent on the run in Libya, to plan the murder of Faisal Zaghalai, a Libyan student who criticized Gaddafi's government and was pursuing a PhD at Colorado State University. Zaghalai miraculously lived after being shot in the head in Fort Collins, Colorado, by Eugene Tafoya, a former Green Beret and Wilson's accomplice. Tafoya was eventually found guilty of third-degree assault and conspiracy to commit assault. Wilson, who was part of the conspiracy, was sent back to the US and received a 32-year sentence for his role in Gaddafi's government. Additionally, in 1984, Gaddafi ordered the execution of al-Sadiq Hamed al-Shawaidi, a mechanical engineer from Libya studying in the US. After the US accused Libya of being involved in the 1986 Berlin discotheque bombing that killed 2 American soldiers, President Ronald Reagan chose to retaliate. Despite disagreements within the CIA, which believed Syria posed a greater threat and advised against aiding Gaddafi, Reagan moved forward with military strikes, labeling Libya as an easy target. With the UK's support, Reagan encountered pushback from other European nations, who argued that the bombings breached international law. Operation El Dorado Canyon, carried out on April 15, 1986, saw U.S. military aircraft strike Libyan military bases, causing around 100 Libyan deaths, including civilians. One of the objectives was Gaddafi's home, where he survived. However, his 2 sons were injured, and Gaddafi alleged that his adopted daughter Hannah was killed, a claim that was later contested. After the strike, Gaddafi sought solitude in the desert for contemplation. The bombings led to intermittent conflicts between Gaddafi's supporters, known as Gaddafists, and military officers who opposed him. Despite international criticism, Reagan's popularity among Americans increased. Gaddafi, in response, used the event to enhance his image as a defender of national sovereignty, taking steps such as renaming the months in Libya in June 1986. Revolution within a Revolution, 1987 to 1998. In the late 1980s, Libya began a comprehensive effort to tackle economic issues caused by falling oil income. This era saw a series of economic reforms starting with Muammar Gaddafi. In May 1987, he launched the Revolution Within a Revolution project with the goal of rejuvenating different sectors like industry, agriculture, and trade. This movement also saw the reopening of small businesses, marking a change from the focus on state control. At the same time, Gaddafi aimed to reduce the power of the revolutionary committees, which had significant influence in Libyan society. In March 1988, their power was limited with the creation of the Ministry for Mass Mobilization and Revolutionary Leadership, which was in charge of controlling their activities and reducing their involvement in violence and the judiciary. Gaddafi publicly criticized the committees in August 1988, indicating a move away from their unchecked power. The push for political liberalization intensified during this time. In March, many political prisoners were freed, though there was debate over Gaddafi's claim that there were no more political prisoners in Libya. In June, Libya issued the Great Green Charter on Human Rights in the Era of the Masses, which outlined 27 articles aimed at enhancing human rights conditions in the country. The charter supported the reduction of the death penalty with the ultimate aim of abolishing it. While some of the charter's provisions were implemented later, others were not. To further demonstrate his commitment to human rights, Gaddafi established the Al-Gaddafi International Prize for Human Rights in 1989. This award honored individuals from the Third World who had fought against colonialism and imperialism, with South African anti-apartheid hero Nelson Mandela being the first recipient. After the U.S. military action against Libya in 1986, Gaddafi made significant changes to the country's security forces. The military was purged of disloyal elements, and in 1988, Gaddafi announced the creation of a popular militia to replace the traditional military and police forces. Despite these internal reforms, Libya faced international criticism for its pursuit of chemical weapons and nuclear weapons capabilities, though these efforts were unsuccessful. Internally, Libya struggled with growing Islamist opposition, led by groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. These groups, along with elements of the military that felt disenfranchised, carried out various acts of insurgency and subversion against Gaddafi's government, resulting in occasional clashes and security measures. Thus, the late 1980s and early 1990s were a period of both internal reform and external challenges for Libya, as Gaddafi aimed to address economic difficulties, political dissent, and international scrutiny. In 1989, Muammar Gaddafi embraced the creation of the Arab Maghreb Union, marking a pivotal moment that brought Libya into a financial partnership with Mauritania, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. This move was seen as a step towards achieving Gaddafi's goal of forming a wider coalition across the Arab world, showcasing his continuous efforts to promote regional collaboration and unity. Gaddafi's influence in Chad saw a resurgence following Idriss Déby's coup in 1990, which removed Hissène Habré from power. Déby's rise to power not only made Gaddafi a strategic ally in Chad but also gave him access to crucial information on CIA operations in the area, bolstering Libya's position in its geopolitical strategies. At the same time, Libya ramped up its backing for groups opposed to Western interests, including the Provisional IRA, reflecting Gaddafi's aggressive stance against Western nations. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, in 1988, led to significant diplomatic fallout, with the British government identifying two Libyans, Abdelbasset al-Megrahi and Lamin Khalifa Fhimah, as the main suspects. The demand for their extradition by British authorities sparked a lengthy diplomatic dispute with Libya, worsening relations between Libya and the West. Gaddafi's decision not to hand over the suspects prompted the United Nations to impose economic sanctions on Libya through Resolution 748 in March 1992, severely impacting the country's economy. These sanctions, designed to pressure Libya into cooperating with the investigation into the Lockerbie bombing, had widespread effects, intensifying Libya's economic challenges and isolating the country diplomatically. In November 1995, U.S. President Bill Clinton reiterated allegations of Libyan involvement in the Lockerbie bombing, further escalating tensions between Libya and Western countries. This renewed criticism highlighted the growing divide between Libya and the international community, especially the United States and its allies. Moreover, in January 1989, 2 Libyan fighter jets were shot down by U.S. forces off the Libyan coast, increasing military tensions in the area. Additionally, the bombing of UTA Flight 772 over the Tenere Desert in Niger in September 1989, which resulted in the deaths of all 170 people on board, strained Libya's relations with the West and heightened global scrutiny of Libya's alleged role in terrorism. In 1996, Gaddafi reached out to Sheikh Hasina, the newly appointed Prime Minister of Bangladesh and the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, aiming to build diplomatic ties and navigate complex international relations. Gaddafi's appeal to Sheikh Hasina highlighted his strategy to use economic and political connections to further Libya's interests on the international stage. Even though it encountered resistance from various Arab and African countries, the UN's measures against Libya lasted until 1998, when Libya consented to send the accused from the Lockerbie bombing case to face justice in a Scottish court situated in the Netherlands, with Nelson Mandela overseeing the proceedings. The trial concluded with Fima being found not guilty and al-Megrahi being sentenced to prison, signifying a major shift in how Libya was perceived by the global community. Nonetheless, Gaddafi persisted in denying Libya's culpability and denied any involvement in the crime, highlighting the ongoing intricacies of Libya's diplomatic relations with Western nations. Pan-Africanism, Reconciliation and Privatization, 1999 to 2011. Links with Africa and conflicts in the Arab League. In the latter half of the 20th century, Muammar Gaddafi's geopolitical goals underwent a significant change, moving away from his earlier focus on Pan-Arabism towards a more pronounced embrace of Pan-Africanism. This change in direction was driven by a mix of reasons, including the failure of Pan-Arabism to achieve concrete results and Libya's growing isolation in the Arab world due to international sanctions and strained diplomatic relations. By the late 1990s, Gaddafi had grown frustrated with the Arab world's inability to challenge the Western-imposed air embargo on Libya. This frustration, along with his desire to form new alliances and seek support, led him to shift Libya's foreign policy towards Africa. Highlighting Libya's historical and cultural connections with Africa, Gaddafi aimed to present his country as a defender of African unity and solidarity. In a 1998 interview, Gaddafi declared the end of the Arab world and called for Libya to adopt an African identity, showcasing his ideological change. He saw Africa as a promising arena for creating new alliances and advancing his vision of a unified and empowered Africa. This vision was more than just words. Gaddafi backed it with real diplomatic efforts and economic partnerships. From the late 1990s to the early 2000s, Libya engaged in extensive diplomatic efforts across Africa. Gaddafi aimed to strengthen Libya's relationships with African nations through bilateral agreements, aid programs, and cultural exchanges. Libya's involvement in regional organizations like the Community of Sahel-Saharan States and its active role in Pan-African forums demonstrated its commitment to closer cooperation with African countries. A key aspect of Gaddafi's Pan-African strategy was his push for the creation of a United States of Africa. At the Organization of African Unity (OAU) summit in Algiers in 1999, he advocated for greater political and economic integration among African states, proposing initiatives such as a single African passport and a common currency. Although initially met with doubt by some African leaders, Gaddafi's determination eventually led to the establishment of the African Union (AU) in 2002. As one of the AU's founding members, Gaddafi played a crucial role in shaping the organization's goals. He used his position to champion efforts aimed at deepening African integration and reducing reliance on external forces. Gaddafi's advocacy for African self-reliance and unity gained him respect and influence among African leaders. However, Gaddafi's push for Pan-Africanism was not without its obstacles and controversies. His ambitious plans for a united Africa faced opposition, and his authoritarian rule and human rights violations damaged Libya's reputation internationally. Moreover, his aggressive stance towards Western powers, especially the United States and Europe, strained Libya's relations with the global community. To sum up, Gaddafi's move towards embracing Pan-Africanism marked a major change in Libya's approach to international relations and its core beliefs. Although his attempts to foster unity and solidarity among African nations were praised by a few, they were also questioned and criticized. However, Gaddafi's reputation as a supporter of Pan-Africanism still impacts discussions on Africa's position in the international community. Rebuilding links with the West. In 1999, Libya began secret talks with the British government with the aim of repairing their relationship. Following the September 11 attacks in 2001, Muammar Gaddafi publicly denounced the actions of al-Qaeda, showing support for the victims and calling for Libya to join the global fight against extremist Islam. At the same time, Gaddafi's government intensified its efforts to suppress local Islamist groups and pushed for the wider application of Sharia law. During this time, Libya strengthened its connections with countries like China and North Korea, welcoming Chinese President Jiang Zemin in April 2002. However, this relationship was strained in May 2006 after a visit to Tripoli by Taiwanese President Chen Shui-bian, leading to tensions with China. The aftermath of the Iraq War influenced Libya to announce in December 2003 that it would give up its weapons of mass destruction and dismantle its chemical and nuclear weapons programs, which improved its relations with the United States. In 2004, Gaddafi made an important trip to the European Union's headquarters in Brussels, indicating a warming of relations between Libya and the EU. As a result, the EU removed its sanctions against Libya. Recognized as a key ally in Europe's efforts to control illegal migration from Africa, Libya received significant financial support from the EU in October 2010 to help stop African migrants from reaching Europe. Gaddafi endorsed this effort, emphasizing the importance of protecting European cultural identity. Furthermore, Libya concluded agreements with Italy, where Italy would invest in various infrastructure projects as a form of compensation for its colonial past in Libya. The official apology from Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi to Libya in 2006 was well received by Gaddafi, who called him the Iron Man. The signing of a cooperation treaty between Gaddafi and Berlusconi in August 2008 was a major achievement, with Italy agreeing to pay $5 billion to Libya as a settlement for its previous military occupation. Even after Libya was removed from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism in 2006, Gaddafi continued to express anti-Western views. At the 2008 Arab League summit, he issued a strong warning to Arab leaders about the possible consequences of Western intervention. Gaddafi's speech to the United Nations General Assembly in 2009 was notable for its criticism of Western aggression and its length, which significantly exceeded the time limit. Gaddafi's involvement in global politics also reached European levels, with accusations of financial backing for Nicolas Sarkozy's presidential campaign in France in 2007 and financial support for Austrian far-right politician Jörg Haider from 2000. Economic reform. The economic scene in Libya saw major shifts as the country moved towards more privatization, marking a move away from the socialist ideals detailed in the Green Book. Officials highlighted a move towards people's socialism instead of embracing full-fledged capitalism, aiming to find a middle ground between government oversight and private business activities. Muammar Gaddafi supported these changes in a significant speech in March 2003, calling for broad privatization and announcing Libya's plan to become a member of the World Trade Organization, WTO. These economic changes drew in a lot of foreign investment, with the amount of direct foreign investment in Libya's economy hitting $40 billion by 2004, showing a notable increase from before. However, these shifts were not without opposition, leading to protests against the privatization measures. Despite these obstacles, hardline revolutionaries took over the General People's Committee cabinet in March 2006, which slowed down the reform process but did not stop it completely. In 2010, there were ambitious plans to privatize half of Libya's economy over the next 10 years. Yet, these plans seemed to hit roadblocks, as major state-owned companies planned for privatization, like the National Commercial Bank and the Libyan Iron and Steel Company, stayed under full government control. Moreover, despite the push for privatization, socialist policies continued in various areas. For example, the agricultural sector remained largely unchanged, with farms operating as cooperatives and the state-owned sector still holding a strong grip. The oil sector, which is a key part of Libya's economy, continued to be dominated by the state. The National Oil Corporation still controlled a majority stake, and the government imposed high taxes on foreign oil production. Additionally, price controls and subsidies for essential items like oil and food were maintained, along with benefits provided by the state such as free education, healthcare, housing, water, and electricity. While economic reforms were in progress, there was no significant move towards political liberalization. Muammar Gaddafi maintained tight control over Libya's political scene, with opposition suppressed. However, there were small steps towards decentralization, with more powers being given to local municipal councils in March 2010. Despite these efforts, major political reforms remained out of reach. In this environment, reform-minded technocrats, including Gaddafi's son and successor, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, rose to prominence. Saif pushed for a new constitution and led efforts to boost tourism. However, his attempts to encourage dissent through privately owned media were blocked, as these outlets were nationalized in 2009 following criticism of the government, highlighting the constraints on political freedom in Libya. Libyan civil war and assassination. Origins and development, February-August 2011. During the tumultuous period of the Arab Spring in 2011, Muammar Gaddafi's position was closely aligned with that of Tunisian President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, who was under intense pressure during the Tunisian Revolution. Gaddafi even suggested that Tunisia adopt Libya's Jamahiriya system, a type of governance, as a way to potentially calm the situation. However, sensing possible internal turmoil, the Libyan government took proactive steps to suppress dissent by reducing food prices, removing potential opponents from the military leadership, and releasing some Islamist prisoners. Despite these measures, widespread protests against Gaddafi's government began on February 17, 2011. Unlike the situations in Tunisia and Egypt, Libya's internal situation was different, lacking a strong Islamist presence. Yet, issues such as widespread corruption, deep-rooted patronage networks, and high unemployment rates fueled the uprising. Gaddafi's reaction was typically defiant, labeling the rebels as drugged and linked to Al-Qaeda. He firmly declared his willingness to die as a martyr rather than give up power. The government's response was quick and severe, with the military opening fire on protesters in Benghazi, leading to a significant loss of life. Disturbed by the government's harsh tactics, several high-ranking officials either stepped down or switched sides to support the protesters. The rebellion quickly spread across eastern Libya, capturing major cities like Benghazi, Misrata, Al-Baida, and Tobruk. In response, the National Transitional Council, NTC, was formed in Benghazi to represent the rebels' interests. At first, it seemed that Gaddafi's regime had the upper hand due to its superior military strength. However, both sides committed serious human rights abuses, including random arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings, worsening the humanitarian crisis. In the face of mounting violence, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1970 on February 26, which suspended Libya from the UN Human Rights Council, imposed sanctions, and called for an International Criminal Court (ICC) investigation into the regime's violent suppression of civilians. Subsequently, in March, the Security Council approved the establishment of a no-fly zone to protect civilians from aerial attacks, while explicitly banning foreign occupation. Despite the ban on foreign intervention, countries like Qatar, France, and the United Arab Emirates backed the rebels by sending troops, weapons, and military training. NATO also committed to enforcing the no-fly zone. The conflict took a tragic turn when a NATO airstrike on April 30 resulted in the deaths of Gaddafi's sixth son and 3 of his grandsons in Tripoli. This action sparked controversy, attracting criticism from leftist governments who saw it as an imperialistic move aimed at gaining control over Libya's valuable resources. In June, the International Criminal Court, ICC, issued warrants for Gaddafi, his son Saif al-Islam, and his brother-in-law Abdullah Sanusi, who was the head of state security, for crimes against humanity. That same month, Amnesty International released their findings, concluding that Gaddafi's forces were guilty of various war crimes. However, they also noted that some claims of human rights violations did not have solid proof. The report highlighted that a lot of Western media has consistently shown a biased perspective on the situation, depicting the protest movement as completely peaceful and often implying that the government's security forces were randomly killing unarmed protesters. In July, more than 30 countries acknowledged the National Transitional Council, NTC, as the rightful government of Libya. Gaddafi urged his followers to overthrow these recognitions, crush them under your feet. They are meaningless. In August, the Arab League acknowledged the NTC as the legitimate representative of Libya. With support from NATO airstrikes, the rebel groups advanced towards the west, overpowering the government's forces and taking control of the country's heart. Obtaining backing from the Amazigh, Berber, groups in the Nafusa Mountains, who had previously faced persecution for speaking languages other than Arabic under Gaddafi, the National Transitional Council, NTC, forces encircled Gaddafi supporters in various crucial regions of western Libya. By August, the opposition had taken control of Zliten and Tripoli, putting an end to the remaining traces of Gaddafi's authority. It's likely that without the NATO airstrikes aiding the opposition, they wouldn't have been able to push westward, and Gaddafi's troops would have eventually regained control over eastern Libya. Capture and killing. After Tripoli fell, only a few towns in the western part of Libya were still under Gaddafi's rule, such as Bani Walid, Siba, and Sirte. It was rumored that Gaddafi was considering seeking shelter in Burkina Faso but ended up returning to his hometown, Sirte. There, he gathered with his son Mutassim and his chief of intelligence, Abdullah Sanusi, only to learn of his youngest son Khamas's death in a NATO attack. Despite these challenges, Gaddafi kept sending out defiant messages through Arai TV, while Sirte was hit hard by NATO airstrikes. At the same time, General Massoud Abdul Hafiz declared Gaddafi as the eternal president of the Republic of Fezzan in Siba, but the city was eventually overrun by rebel groups. In Sirte, Gaddafi's efforts to escape capture grew more desperate. With a small group of followers, he moved around frequently to dodge NATO and NTC attacks, spending his time in prayer and studying the Quran. Yet, on October 20th, he recorded a goodbye message before trying to escape Sirte in a group of vehicles. The group was attacked by NATO airstrikes, resulting in casualties. Gaddafi sought safety in a nearby house, but it was attacked by rebel forces. Running to a construction site, Gaddafi and his inner circle fought a fierce battle with the rebels. Gaddafi was wounded by a grenade and his defense minister, Jabr, was killed. In the end, the Misrata militia captured Gaddafi, causing him serious injuries during his capture. Videos showed the chaotic scene of his transport to Misrata, where he was discovered dead upon his arrival. There were differing accounts of his death, with some saying he died from injuries in a crossfire, while others claimed he was killed by rebels with gunshot wounds. In the late afternoon, Mahmoud Jibril, the head of the National Transitional Council, NTC, Prime Minister, made the announcement of Gaddafi's demise. His body was interred in the freezer section of a nearby market, next to the remains of Yunus Jabr and Mutassim, where they were openly exhibited for 4 days, attracting visitors from across Libya. The event was extensively covered by media outlets worldwide. Following global requests, Jibril declared on October 24 that a committee would be formed to probe the circumstances surrounding Gaddafi's death. On October 25, the NTC declared that Gaddafi's remains were interred in an undisclosed desert location. Political ideology. The beliefs and values of Muammar Gaddafi were deeply influenced by a variety of elements, such as his Islamic background, his nomadic ancestry, and his strong dislike for the Italian colonizers who had ruled over Libya. These factors combined to form a sophisticated outlook that developed over his lifetime. From a young age, Gaddafi was drawn to the principles of Arab nationalism and Arab socialism, greatly inspired by leaders like Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, whom he saw as a hero. Nasser's vision of a united Arab world resonated with Gaddafi, driving his desire to restore the Arab world's honor and assert its presence on the international stage. He believed that the Arab world's current struggles were due to centuries of Ottoman domination, European colonial rule, and the rise of corrupt and oppressive Arab monarchies. Gaddafi's dedication to Arab nationalism led him to advocate for the unification of Arab countries under one nation, aiming to create a strong and unified Arab entity capable of resisting external pressures. He was a strong proponent of pan-Arabism and worked to form political alliances with Arab neighbors, though his efforts were somewhat limited in success. In the early 1970s, Gaddafi started to develop his own ideological framework, known as the Third International Theory. This theory, as detailed in his renowned book, The Green Book, merged socialism, Arab nationalism, and the principles of Third World Revolutionary theory. Gaddafi viewed this theory as a practical alternative to both Western capitalism and Marxism-Leninism, designed to meet the specific needs and ambitions of Arab and African nations. Despite his focus on issues within the Arab and African regions, Gaddafi also had ambitions to spread his revolutionary ideas internationally. He saw his socialist Jamahiriya as a blueprint for other nations to follow, believing that his Third International Theory could guide not just the Arab and Islamic communities but also the wider non-aligned movement. However, Gaddafi's attempts to disseminate his ideology encountered numerous obstacles and faced varying degrees of opposition. While he found support among certain global audiences, particularly in Africa and the developing world, his revolutionary zeal often clashed with the interests of established powers and encountered resistance from within Libya itself. In conclusion, Gaddafi's ideological perspective was a complex blend of Arab nationalism, socialism, and anti-colonial sentiments, shaped by his personal experiences and ambitions for both Libya and the wider Arab world. Apart from his strong support for Arab nationalism, Muammar Gaddafi's government was marked by a deep-seated opposition to imperialistic forces, especially those from the West, including their actions and ambitions in the Arab region, as well as the presence and policies of Israel. Gaddafi was deeply opposed to Western domination and colonialism, backing various political factions overseas that were anti-imperialist, particularly those challenging the United States. For a long time, Gaddafi's beliefs were rooted in a total rejection of Zionism and the State of Israel. He considered any attempt at dialogue or agreement with Israel to be a betrayal of the Arab populace. His hostility towards the United States was intensified by its backing of Israel, which he viewed as an imperialist force, and he frequently criticized the US as the symbol of evil. Gaddafi's rhetoric against Zionism also included a distinction between Oriental Jews, who had deep historical ties to the Middle East, and European Jews who came to Palestine in the 20th century. He saw the latter as invaders and spies, who he believed should go back to Europe. His speeches often contained harsh criticisms of Jews, leading some to compare his anti-Semitism to that of Adolf Hitler. However, as Gaddafi's focus shifted towards Pan-Africanism in the early 21st century, his views on the Israel-Palestine conflict began to change. He introduced the idea of Isra'tin, advocating for a unified state where both Jewish and Palestinian communities could live together. This vision, though, would have meant that the Jewish community would become a minority in the new state. Islamic modernism and Islamic socialism. Gaddafi's beliefs and political path were deeply influenced by his surroundings and personal experiences. His Islamic religion, upbringing among the Bedouin, and bitterness towards Italian colonial rule in Libya all played a crucial role in forming his convictions and guiding his political journey. Throughout his educational years, Gaddafi was drawn to the ideas of Arab nationalism and Arab socialism, greatly inspired by leaders like Egyptian President Nasser, whom he looked up to. Yet, he crafted his own distinctive philosophy, merging elements of utopian socialism, Arab nationalism, and the theory of Third World Revolution, as detailed in his Green Book. This philosophy aimed at establishing a perfect society, separate from the influence of Western capitalism and Marxism-Leninism. Arab nationalism and opposition to imperialism were key principles in Gaddafi's government, as he strongly opposed Western domination and colonialism in the Arab region, especially concerning Israel. He backed various anti-imperialist movements worldwide and viewed the United States as the embodiment of evil for its backing of Israel. Gaddafi's opposition to Zionism was a fundamental part of his ideology, and he called for the eradication of Israel's statehood. In addition to Arab nationalism, Islam was a significant factor in Gaddafi's political outlook. He believed in the inseparability of Arabism and Islam, advocating for Islamic law to underpin the legal framework of the state. Gaddafi aimed for unity among Muslims across the globe and pushed for the spread of Islam worldwide. Economically, Gaddafi championed Islamic socialism, advocating for a society where people could manage their own needs through personal or collective ownership. He progressively moved Libya from a capitalist to a socialist model, emphasizing the state's control over the economy. Despite his rejection of Marxism's central ideas, such as the concept of class struggle, Gaddafi's socialism showed some Marxist characteristics. In summary, Gaddafi's ideology was a complex blend of Arab nationalism, opposition to imperialism, Islamism, and socialism, all influenced by his upbringing, religious beliefs, and the geopolitical landscape. Personal life. Gaddafi was a notably private person, frequently seeking alone time for deep thinking and self-reflection. He identified as a simple revolutionary and a devout Muslim, feeling a spiritual mission to carry on Nasser's work. Van de Waal noted that his understanding of Islam was very personal and distinct. Despite his reserved nature, Gaddafi had a wide range of interests. He was a passionate supporter of soccer and took pleasure in playing and horseback riding for fun. As someone who valued knowledge, he looked up to Beethoven and had a fondness for literary works such as Uncle Tom's Cabin, Roots, and The Outsider. Recognized for his focus on his appearance, Gaddafi was seen as exceptionally vain. He owned a large collection of clothes and often switched his outfits several times daily, preferring military uniforms or traditional Libyan clothing to Western suits. He saw himself as a trendsetter in fashion, acknowledging the impact his style had on setting new trends. When he came to power, Gaddafi lived in the Bab al-Azizia barracks, a large fortified area near Tripoli. His way of life was seen as more frugal than that of other Arab leaders. Security was a paramount concern for Gaddafi, which led him to frequently switch places for sleeping and to enforce rigorous travel rules, including staying in a tent made of bulletproof material during overseas visits, in line with his Bedouin heritage. He took a tough approach towards Western nations, often suspecting Western diplomats of being spies. During the 1970s and 1980s, there were accounts of him pursuing sexual relationships with female journalists and his entourage. Beginning in the 1980s, he traveled with a group of female Amazonian Guard members, who were allegedly bound by vows of celibacy. Following Gaddafi's demise, the Libyan psychologist Siem Serjwa, who was part of a team investigating sexual misconduct during the civil war, reported that 5 of the guards disclosed to her that they had been subjected to sexual assault by Gaddafi and other senior officials. After Gaddafi's passing, the French journalist Annick Cogian published a book suggesting that Gaddafi engaged in sexual activities with women, including some as young as teenagers, who were specifically chosen by him. One of the women Cogian spoke to, Soraya, alleged that Gaddafi confined her to a basement for 6 years, where he repeatedly sexually assaulted her, exposed himself to her, forced her to view pornography, consume alcohol, and use cocaine. The alleged sexual misconduct was supported by Gaddafi's chief of protocol Nouri al-Masmari and Mabruka Sharif. Gaddafi also employed several Ukrainian nurses to look after him. One described him as kind and was taken aback by the allegations of abuse against him. Gaddafi's first marriage was to Fatiha al-Nouri in 1969. Although they had a son, Muhammad Gaddafi, born 1970, their marriage was fraught with difficulties, leading to their divorce in 1970. His second wife was Safia Farkash, formerly known as Safia el-Brasai, a nurse from the Obidat tribe, whom he met in 1969 after he became the leader of Libya. They were married following his hospitalization for appendicitis, with Gaddafi claiming it was love at first sight. The couple remained together until his death. Together, they had 7 biological children: Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, born 1972, al-Sadi Gaddafi, born 1973, Muammar Gaddafi, 1974 to 2011, Hannibal Muammar Qaddafi, born 1975, Aisha Gaddafi, born 1976, Saif al-Arab Gaddafi, 1982 to 2011, and Qamis Gaddafi, 1983 to 2011. He also adopted 2 children, Hannah Gaddafi and Milad Gaddafi. Several of his sons were known for their extravagant and antisocial behavior in Libya, which led to resentment towards his government. At least 3 of his relatives played significant roles in his regime. Ahmed Gaddafi al-Dam served as Libya's former special envoy to Egypt and was a key figure in the Gaddafi regime. Mansour Deo was his chief of security and led the People's Guard. Syed Gaddafi al-Dam was a brigadier general and was considered the second most influential person in Libya during the 1980s. Public life. Van de Waal mentioned that during his tenure, Gaddafi dominated the political scene in Libya. Raymond H. Hinnebusch, a sociologist, referred to Gaddafi as perhaps the best example of modern charismatic leadership, showcasing all the characteristics of charismatic authority as defined by Max Weber. Hinnebusch explained that the basis of Gaddafi's personal charismatic leadership in Libya was rooted in the favor he received from Nasser and his nationalist successes, including the removal of foreign military bases, securing higher oil prices for Libya, and his vocal backing for the Palestinian and other anti-imperialist movements. A cult of personality centered around Gaddafi was prevalent throughout his rule. His biographer Alison Pargeter observed that he occupied every nook and cranny, shaping the entire nation around himself. His image was ubiquitous across Libya, appearing on everything from postage stamps to watches and school bags. Quotations from the Green Book were displayed in numerous locations, from public walls to airports and pens, and were even adapted into popular music. In private, Gaddafi often expressed his dislike for this cult of personality, yet he endured it due to the overwhelming love from the Libyan people. This cult had a political function, aiding Gaddafi in establishing a unified national identity for Libya. Various biographers and observers have labeled Gaddafi as a populist. He was known for his participation in extended public sessions inviting questions from the audience, which were often broadcasted. Throughout Libya, supporters would gather at these events. These gatherings were sometimes organized through coercion or payment. Gaddafi was frequently late to these events, and there were instances where he did not show up. Despite being considered a gift for oratory by Bianco, he was seen as an ineffective speaker by Blundy and Lycett. Daniel Kofshinsky noted that Gaddafi was celebrated for his long, meandering speeches, which often criticized Israel and the US. Ruth first described his orations as unending, sometimes incoherent, filled with snippets of unformed opinions, warnings, secrets, some practical advice, and as much bias.